makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
I'm going to spare Jimmy Dore a bit today, but not one of Jimmy Dore's allies on the internet, a site called the Grayzone, which if you've watched the Jimmy Dore show, you'll notice that they often appear on his segments, usually discussing issues of foreign policy, geopolitics. They're basically Jimmy Dore's geopolitical consultants. And I have real issues with the Grayzone because, contrary to a site that has the word gray in it, they have a very black and white view of the world, which essentially can be summed up in the idea that everything bad that happens in the world is because of US and Western imperialism. There is no room in the gray zone for other tyrants and dictators doing horrible things to other states or to their own people. Now, I take it if most of you are of a leftist persuasion, you will agree that US and Western imperialism is not a force for good. And in fact, I will happily agree with the gray zone and even the most extreme leftists that it is probably the most destructive force in the world, along with neoliberalism and capitalism. But I don't need to defend dictators like Bashar al-Assad to make that point. I don't need to justify every single thing that Russia does. Its invasion of Georgia, its support for Ukrainian separatists, its takeover of the Crimea, its indiscriminate bombing of civilians in Syria. I don't need to do that to attack Western imperialism. And one country where it's this kind of thinking is dear to my heart is Venezuela. And I'll explain in a bit why it's dear to my heart, not just because it's Latin America. So, to show you how the gray zone makes you stupid, I'm going to show you a video of Max Blumenthal, who is one of their main figures. I think he was one of the founders of the gray zone. When he goes to Venezuela and decides that he's going to disprove the mainstream media narrative of a humanitarian crisis by going to a lavishly stocked upscale Caracas supermarket. That's the scale of objectivity and impartiality that you will regularly see from these dimwits. And before we start with the video, I'm going to show you basically the front page of their Venezuela output, and you will notice all the common themes of US regime change, sanctions, insurrectionists, coup d'etat, assisting the right, coup plotting, US blockades, etc., etc., etc. You see the pattern. You see what kind of people they are. I should note that at this point in time, I have no Venezuelan friends who defend the regime. Even the ones that were originally very pro-Chavez back in the day, none of them defend the Maduro regime. None of them. The only people nowadays that I am aware of that defend Maduro are idiot Westerners who don't have skin in the game, who do not live in Venezuela, who do not have family in Venezuela, who really supporting a regime that continuously destroys the standard of living of what was one of Latin America's wealthiest countries does not affect them in the least bit, which is why I find this kind of reporting over Venezuela despicable, absolutely despicable, because it is completely uncaring to the actual plight of real Venezuelans. And a reminder, Venezuela has suffered the biggest economic depression of any Latin American country in recorded history, even in wartime. Venezuela has suffered the biggest refugee crisis in human history outside of war. These are not made up stories. These are not CIA funded State Department pro-war narratives. This is reality. I've seen dipshit leftists in protest in London shout and insult Venezuelans who've been protesting outside their embassy, calling them essentially tools of the CIA, US agents, whatever. That's the scale of how disgusting these people are. Because these people don't need to go back to Venezuela. They're not Venezuelan, you know. You live in your comfortable Western home where you can have the luxury of essentially propping up a dictator who locks up his opponents and prevents free and fair elections. You can defend him from the comfort of your Western home, all for your fucking ideological posturing. So, having said that, let's watch this video, which I will add a cringe warning because it's really cringe.
And what is on the plane are basic goods, things that aren't available or accessible in Venezuela, things like nutritional biscuits, toothpaste, toothbrushes, just basic commodities that aren't available or readily available to Venezuelans right now because of the regime that they're currently living under.
We're at a supermarket in Caracas called Gama.
Okay, so first and foremost, Max Blumenthal doesn't really give you much background about Gama. He just says he's in a supermarket called Gama. Gama happens to be one of Venezuela's most upscale supermarket chains. It's called Excelsior Gama. And what he wants to do in this video is basically present to you this view of this being a normal shopping experience for the average Venezuelan, which it is not. And I'm going to explain in a bit where this supermarket is, kind of the neighborhood around it, so you get a gist of who actually goes to a supermarket like this.
I feel lost in the supermarket coming here in Caracas. This is Jesus.
Oh, by the way, there's a woman who appears in this video on numerous occasions, and she's wearing that like black dress, and I wonder if she's like an assistant or something. I don't know. But this is just very, very curious, because in her first appearance, he sort of like notices that they're filming, and then she moves out. But you'll see her very often in this video.
Caracas. This is Jesus. There's a lot of cheeses.
Wait.
I feel lost in the supermarket.
There we go.
Coming here in Caracas. This is Jesus. There's a lot of cheeses and meats here. People here like meat, and there's a lot of meats. Fish heads, roly-poly fish heads. Okay, we got like congealed meat. We got like so much meat. There's a lot of meat here. I mean, a lot of tomato sauce. You can see the aisles are pretty full of stuff. I mean, they got a whole aisle for pasta. A lot of people love yogurt here. Man. The cruelty of this dictatorship prevents them from having 0% Greek yogurt. There's energy drinks, all kinds of drinks. Sugars. I don't know what this says. Does it say Maduro is using hunger as a weapon to enforce communism among his people? To make children, he's forcing children to smile.
So this is very interesting. This is not a government ad, as he seems to be implying. This is actually a campaign from the foundation of the supermarket chain, which is quite common in Latin America for big supermarket chains to have like their philanthropic arm. Also common with Western supermarkets. So this is not a government ad in any way. The campaign is called Una Sonrisa a su cuenta, and you can actually Google it and confirm that it's actually from Excelsior Gama, the stores. And I want to also point something out. All the kids in this ad are white. And this is important because you will see what the target demographic is for this supermarket, which is essentially Venezuela's white elite. Venezuela, like every other Latin America country, has a white elite. These are usually the descendants of the Spanish colonial elite, as well as European immigrants who have come over the last century or so. And Latin America really was the world's first melting pot, well before the US was, well before Europe became diverse. Latin America has had ethnic integration long before this, for centuries. And most Latin American countries are composed of basically three main groups. So you have the whites, which tend to be the elites in every single society, the economic elites in every society, not necessarily the political elites, but definitely the economic elites. If you look at the top 50 or 100 companies in Latin America, look at their CEOs, they will all be white, all of them, like pure European descended white. Then you have the indigenous people, the original natives of Latin America, as well as mestizos, who are the mixture of indigenous people and whites. And in certain countries, you also have a large number of Afro-descendants, usually slaves that were brought during the colonial period or afterwards. Countries like Brazil, for example, Cuba, Venezuela and Colombia as well have a large number of Afro-descendants, as well as mulattoes, which are the mixture of Afro-descendants and white people. So you can basically tell someone's socioeconomic class in Latin America by looking at their skin color. It is and this is actually used in actual development studies in Latin America. The whiter you are in Latin America in terms of the color of your skin, the more likely you will be in the upper areas of the socioeconomic pyramid. And the darker your skin is, the more likely you'll be at the bottom. And Latin America is a very unequal, it's the most unequal region in the world, and part of that inequality is racial inequality, and the lack of social mobility that exists in Latin America is strongly tied to the differences in income and economic power between the different races. So that's your lesson on Latin American ethnicities. A friendly reminder to Westerners that Latin Americans are not one race. In fact, there is no such thing as a Latin American race. At best, it's an ethnicity. And even then, there are huge, huge differences among people in these countries and across countries. And, the best example I always give people is Ricky Martin and Ronaldinho are both Latin Americans, and you cannot find two people who look more different. So, there you go. And just to explain a bit on Venezuela, Venezuela does have a very comprehensive mix of white, indigenous, and black among it. Not every country has all three components. Mexico, for example, doesn't have many Afro descendants at all, just a tiny few. On the other hand, you have like Brazil doesn't have many indigenous people as well relative to the population. And then you have a few countries in the southern cone that are majority white, like Argentina and Uruguay. In fact, I think they have a higher proportion of white people than the US. So that's pretty much the mix of races in Latin America.
Here you can see something serious with the speculation is the pet food. Pet food is here. This one costs 66,000 bolivars, which is over $20. That's the problem here. The problem isn't scarcity. The problem is inflation and speculation brought on by the capitalist class of this country.
So that's basically like the line, the anti-war line, that this is all an economic war against poor Maduro from the country's capitalist elites and the US. That's the line. That's bullshit, okay? And I'm gonna explain later why it's bullshit. But in the meantime, just think about it. Speculation. Do you think that dog food is like the ideal, like fancy dog food is the ideal consumer good that you want to speculate in? In a crisis that's now many years old. That's what you're going to speculate on. As we will see later, what really is speculated on is not dog food, but it's actually the actual like essential goods in the consumer basket. But not that Max Blumenthal cares about that. And one other thing that I'm going to point out is at the time of this video, February 2019, the minimum wage in Venezuela was 18,000 bolivares, plus a food stipend of 1,800. So at best, on the minimum wage, you would get 19,800 bolivares for food. You can compare that with the prices of many of these items, and you will see just how unaffordable a place like this is to the average Venezuelan, or well, to the bottom part of the poorest parts of Venezuela.
Got my toilet paper. This will help with the pollo crispy sandwich that I just ate. This toilet paper has chamomile, manzanilla's chamomile, which relaxes your butt, and then aloe vera will cool your butt off. There's a lot of eggs over there. There's some broken eggs over here. I'm wasting food in Maduro's dictatorship, just throwing it away. This is the fruit section. We got a lot of mangoes. I don't know what that is. I learned this in camp. Does this have...
He tries so hard to be funny and it's so cringe. Really. Oh.
Chamomile and aloe vera? No, it has...
If I'm ever that cringe, please unsubscribe from this channel. Just please. Yeah, don't ever watch me again if I start doing that, pulling that ugly American tourist shit. Just, yeah.
It's chamomile. This is chamomile. Chamomile, manzanilla. Thank you, Maduro. Okay, well now we're in the pharmaceutical section.
Toothpaste, toothbrushes, just basic commodities that aren't available or readily available to Venezuelans right now because of the regime that they're currently living under.
Oh, aloe vera. That'll match with my toilet paper, the aloe vera. Finally found my shampoo and conditioner. It took me like a while to do that because there are so many varieties. Damn you, Maduro! We're now in the pharmacy. Sí, está bien, pero no hay algo con aloe vera y manzanilla. No. Pinche Maduro. No es un mercado socialista.
See, that girl is always there. Like, there's been like 4 shots where she's there. Now, note that this is the first dark-skinned person that we've seen in the entire video. Almost everyone else looks white-ish, but you haven't seen yet any actual like black or dark-skinned people until now. And it's clearly the person who works there, not someone who's actually shopping there. So I'm just saying this so you can get a sense of where he actually went and why this isn't the average store in Venezuela. And I'm going to show a video later on which shows what the average working Venezuelan looks like. And it's not like the ones who are shopping here.
No, es una mentira que todo es socialismo en Venezuela. Sí. Sí. Y los precios de algunas cosas son malos porque es especulación, ¿sí? Sí. De los capitalistas, ¿sí? De Colombia y todo. De todo eso. Sí. Es triste. Mm-hmm. All right, now finally we get to get
that, by the way, that is like his only encounter with a local Venezuelan. Like, that is his only. It's not even an interview, but yeah. And the guy sort of like brushes him off, obviously, because he's being a bit ridiculous with the kind of framing of his questions. But anyway.
The rum, maybe some beers. There's actually a lot of new beers coming onto the Venezuelan market. They're kind of getting into craft beer. And over here we got all the rums. I mean, got wine, a good decent wine section. They have some Chilean wines here. What the hell is that? Olive oil is really expensive. This right here is 85,000 bolivares, and that is about almost $30 for that. So then that's all speculation. These are products that come from the outside, and people are hoarding them here and speculating and making a ton of money. There's some really fine stuff over here, actually. This is 18-year Scotch, all kinds of whiskey.
So you're not explaining like how are they speculating on a good that's essentially being sold legally? Because all of this requires a black market, and we're going to discuss the black market in a bit as well. But what he's basically showing is, you know, a store that has a considerable number of imported goods, and this is why it's so well stocked. And there's a bit in a few minutes where he's gonna reveal how it's possible that you have stores like this.
Stuff I've never heard of. The Portuguese, Chilean, Argentinian, and French champagne, and Spanish champagne. In Venezuela, I have unlimited buying power because I have dollars, and the dictatorship of the dollar controls the world. Okay, so...
There you go. That is exactly why a store like that can be so very well stocked. Because these are stores that allow you to pay in dollars. So these are stores that have a stock of dollars, which can then be used to buy imports with those dollars. That's how trade works. As we say in economics, the only point of exporting is to pay for your imports. So if you are in possession of the mighty dollar, like a ugly American tourist, or an elite Venezuelan who clearly has quite a stock of dollars in his possession, unlike the working classes and poor, those dollars will go a long way. Anyway, mental note of this parking lot. Take a look at the painting on the pillars. This will be important. We're gonna show another video of this store a couple of years before, just so you can tell that it's proof that it's the same one.
I had a pretty normal experience at the supermarket. I was able to get pretty much everything that I usually get back home in the States, including like this bag of craft beer, until I couldn't, my credit card didn't work and I had to pay in cash. I paid in dollars, and that really shows what the problem is here, that I had to pay in dollars. There isn't an issue here with food distribution or food scarcity. The issue is the buying power of Venezuelans has been completely destroyed because their currency has been so badly weakened by hyperinflation, speculation, and the flood of dollars that the government can't control here, as well as hoarding by private capitalist elements that support the opposition and are making a ton of money off of this kind of economic war.
Did Max Blumenthal mention at all of the currency controls that exist in Venezuela? The absurdly different exchange rates that used to exist between what, say, the government entities can get dollars from and what the actual people could convert their bolivars into dollars, which ultimately resulted in the creation of a giant black market for currency. Did he mention that? No, he didn't. Further proof that this is a very upscale establishment is, look at the cars. Do you think the average Venezuelan drives these cars? Are you kidding me? This is such a bullshit video. Like, this is unbelievable how I mean, I guess if you're Westerner and you're in this kind of anti-war dipshit environment, you're not going to question anything that the Grayzone presents to you, but seriously, do you not question Latin America is considerably poorer than the West. Is it normal that Latin Americans shop in supermarkets that are as nice, if not nicer, than the supermarkets that I shop in the US or Britain? I mean, does this look like your average Walmart or Tesco? It's just as nice, if not nicer. It's certainly bigger than most Tesco's in the UK, or Sainsbury's, or any of the other supermarket brands in the UK that I know of. So, seriously, is this normal? Do they drive these cars? Do they buy dog food that costs like $20 or more? You gotta be kidding me. Like, when does the skeptic part of your brain start get turned on when you watch something like this and realize that they're lying to you? They're really lying to you. And this is so disgusting, because he should have gone and showed you how average Venezuelans live, not the rich. And you could have constructed so many arguments from a leftist perspective, but he doesn't. All he wants is like this, quirky video with like a gotcha for people to just see it and be like, oh, what? See, it's mainstream media narrative is that's not true. Like, because they showed all the supermarkets were empty. This is so bad, so bad. And by the way, keep watching, because I'm going to explain how scarcity actually works.
And that's something you really won't know if you watch U.S. media on Venezuela. And that's why we're here, the Grayzone, to break the media blockade.
So yeah, that's the trash that you will expect on a regular basis from the Grayzone. And now let's do some forensic analysis. I googled Excelsior Gamma to see where the stores are, and because I wanted to find that particular one and kind of see what the neighborhood looked like. And when this video was quite dear to my heart because actually I was born in Venezuela. This is not a channel where I'm going to reveal many personal aspects of myself, but I think this one is kind of warranted. I was actually born in Venezuela accidentally because my parents, who are Mexican, were working in Venezuela when that happened. So yeah, I've never had Venezuelan citizenship. I have very few memories of it, hardly any actually. And turns out that there are, so I was looking at the different types of Gamma stores that they have, and they have the Express, which are the small ones, and they have the Gamma, which are the normal ones, and then they have the Gamma Plus, which are the big ones. And there's only 2 Gamma Plus, and one of them is here, and I suspect this is the one that that Blumenthal went to. And this is a relatively nice part of Caracas. I suppose this is where a lot of the city's wealthier people live. You have a nice neighborhood over here with houses, some of which have pools, big park. These are probably quite well off apartment blocks. Yeah, more leafy little houses around here. Yeah, the east part of Caracas seems to be the nicer bits. And in comparison, let's look at a Caracas slum, which is also in this direction. That's what a slum looks like. And if you'll notice, there are no Gamma stores around here, because clearly that is not the socioeconomic class that they cater to. In fact, all the Gamma stores are found in quite nice parts of town, like these really nice looking enclaves in the hills. There's a Gamma store there, another Gamma store here, yeah, Gamma here, where there's clearly a golf course. And you won't find many in the western part of the city, which is, so this is the actual downtown, and I suspect the areas in the western part of Caracas are mostly working class because they look grayer, less leafy than the rest. And as you can see, there's no Gamma stores there at all. So that's the clientele that they cater to. So that is not your average Venezuelan supermarket in any way. So he fooled you there. He presented this as being how the average Venezuelan lives. That is patently untrue. Anyway, there's another aspect of this video that is a bit concerning to this narrative, which is the date. And it's 2019. And the fact of the matter is that in 2019, the Venezuelan economy was actually doing much better. So the peak of their crisis really was before 2019. The worst bit was probably around 2015-16. And I used to cover Venezuela in my previous job, and that's when I noticed that a lot of the statistics that were being published by the government, they stopped publishing them because they were too embarrassing. Anyway, I want to show you another video of how things were back at the peak of the crisis, which was around 2015. This video is from 2015. Yes, it's from the CIA MI6 sponsored BBC. But this, if you think this video is doctored in any way, you have issues. Okay, so let's just watch, because it'll show you how things were a couple of years before, and it actually has a part in that very same supermarket, which is why I told you to make note of the parking lot.
Normalmente, cuando uno no tiene nada en la nevera o en la despensa, va a la tienda de la esquina y compra lo esencial. Pero no en Venezuela. Acá, conseguir lo básico implica mucho trabajo. Y mucho tiempo. Es viernes por la mañana y como muchos venezolanos, voy a recorrer la ciudad a ver si logro comprar productos básicos. Acá tengo una lista de 8 productos básicos. Sus precios están regulados por el Estado y por eso, en parte, es que son escasos.
So, this is very important. In Blumenthal's video, you saw stock, shelf after shelf, lavishly stocked with a lot of goods. But most of these were not essential goods. And I'm going to show you some other videos later that show in situations of scarcity, it's not that everything is missing. In fact, you may have an overabundance of items that are not essential. The problem was in Venezuela that there was scarcity in a lot of basic goods, and basic goods that were regulated by the state. So as a result of their crisis, they had to regulate prices, which ended up being below the market value, which subsequently, because the economic conditions were so bad, gave a huge incentive for people to sell them in the black market if they can get their hands on it. And this was not done, as a conspiracy by, the capitalist class, the capitalist elites, the Colombia, the US, the CIA. No. This was normal people doing it, and normal people who were desperate. I'm not blaming them for doing it at all. You see this kind of behavior when there's a natural disaster, things like that. It's not nice to be in a situation where you can't find things, but given the state of the economy at the time, given the state of the crisis, you really can't blame people for doing this.
Mi presupuesto son 600 bolívares, que es más o menos 10% del salario mínimo mensual. Eso es aproximadamente lo que gasta un venezolano en un día en productos básicos. Primero, el supermercado más cercano.
So that's the same one that he goes to, and you can tell that it's a Gamma Plus.
Raro, no hay fila afuera. Pero
so he's saying there wasn't any line outside, but there was one in the parking lot, and you can tell that's the same parking lot. It's amazing how the CIA stages all of this, all these crisis actors. Amazing. Great work, CIA.
Últimamente se ven muchas filas en los estacionamientos. Unos dicen que el gobierno las quiere esconder, pero otros que es para que la gente no reciba tanto sol. 9 y 7 de la mañana, estamos haciendo una cola para tener un número y después haremos otra cola en la que podremos comprar el producto. No se sabe bien qué es lo que hay, parece que hay aceite de cocina. Las colas son, por supuesto, el mejor lugar para saber de qué se está hablando en las calles.
So, this was very important. What he's saying is, people usually make these massive lines, not because they can't find anything in stores, but because there's a certain item that they can't get, a certain essential item. So a lot of these people are only there to buy one item because that's the one that they can't find. That's the one that is representing scarcity.
Nos acaban de informar que el aceite de cocina se acabó. El producto que estábamos buscando no hay. Así que vamos a ir a otro supermercado porque lo que necesitábamos no lo podemos comprar acá.
So what he says is he's just been told by the people there that the cooking oil ran out, and cooking oil was one of the items that he was going to look for. So no point in being in that line anymore. Let's go to a different place. That's, I repeat, how scarcity works. It's not that everything can't be found. It's just that a couple of few things can't be found, and you will struggle to find them.
Ajá, mensaje de texto de una amiga. Dice que hay harina de maíz en el supermercado de la Urbina. Un poco lejos y tengo que apurarme, así que cojamos un motorizado. Es algo costoso para mi presupuesto del día, pero los mototaxis son la forma más rápida de moverse en Caracas.
So basically what he's saying there is that often people inform their friends when they are in a store and they realize that that store does have a certain item, then they tell their friends and their friends go. Which coincidentally will increase the speed at which it will run out if everyone just swarms to the places that have that item. So there's an element of luck whether you find what you're looking for.
Son las 10:30 de la mañana ya. Hemos estado afuera 1 hora y media y no hemos podido comprar nada. Ahora llegamos a la Urbina. Ya tenemos nuestro turno en un supermercado. Vamos a ver qué podemos encontrar. El señor acá me decía que lleva tratando de comprar productos desde las 5 de la mañana. Lo único que ha podido conseguir es carne.
So also note that when he's in the less affluent supermarkets, because clearly he's no longer in an Excelsior Gamma, look at how look at the racial composition of people in there. They are more darker skinned. You can tell that this is a more middle or working class environment.
Finalmente pude comprar algo, harina pan, que es uno de los productos más preciados en Venezuela. Son las 12:30 de la mañana y después de hacer esta cola y otra cola dentro del supermercado, por fin pude comprar algo.
So he finally found flour, which is clearly a staple item in Venezuela, given the popularity of their national dish, the arepa. So, yeah.
Los críticos del gobierno dicen que la causa de la escasez son los controles de precios, porque hacen que revender sea demasiado rentable y producir el peor negocio posible. Pero el gobierno dice que el desabastecimiento es parte de una guerra económica, que esconde, acapara y contrabandea los productos para desestabilizar al país. Para solucionar esto, el gobierno está tratando de controlar las compras de la gente. Y la última medida, sensores de huellas digitales para que la gente no compre más de lo que puede necesitar.
So what he said there is that one of the criticism of the government's economic policy is that by regulating prices, you've created a black market and created scarcity as a result. And so the reaction from the government, which has always insisted this is not true, that this is part of the, quote, economic war against it, is then to limit the number of essential goods that can be sold. Essential goods being the ones with the regulated prices.
¡Upa! Esta señora lleva detergente. Ah, sí, porque mirar las bolsas de la gente en la calle es la mejor forma de saber qué es lo que hay en tal supermercado. No lo pudimos tener en cámara porque había...
So see, there's all the shelves are stocked. That's how scarcity works. I repeat, it's not that everything has run out. It's that the essential items that you need have run out. And they haven't run out permanently. It's just that at the moment you are in a supermarket, there is no guarantee that you will find these items.
Guardias nacionales ahí, pero miraron mi pasaporte que termina en 3, que es el día con el que hoy se puede comprar en este supermercado, y pude conseguir detergente. He pasado toda la mañana buscando productos. Acabo de comprar detergente y jabón para lavar platos, así que en total son 3 productos de toda mi lista que he podido conseguir en una mañana. Algunos estudios dicen que en promedio los venezolanos pasan 8 horas a la semana haciendo fila.
So they say that some studies have shown that Venezuelans spend 8 hours in line for basic goods a week.
Algunos no van a trabajar para dedicarle el día a comprar productos. Otros trabajan buscando productos que después venden mucho más caros. Son las 2:40 de la tarde y mi presupuesto prácticamente se fue. Me quedan 120 bolívares que sin embargo puedo ahorrar para mañana y darme el lujo de ir al mercado negro donde estos mismos productos se encuentran fácilmente pero por mucha más plata.
So he's saying that with the rest of his money, the next day he's going to go to the black market. Well, here he's going to find those goods without that much hassle, but at a higher price. So that's the distortions created in the Venezuelan economy, which have resulted in effectively wide-scale speculation. That is true, but this isn't a plot by the government. This is the fact that the Venezuelan economy is just so badly managed, so distorted, that you end up with things like a black market when you have a large amount of regulated prices on basic goods, when you have currency controls, when you have exchange rates that are not set on anything resembling the actual market value of dollars in Venezuela. That is the problem. But not that Max Blumenthal cares, because Max Blumenthal prefers to hang out in the wealthy parts of Caracas. And here's another video that he made a couple of days later where he is in a luxury mall. At least this time he admits that it's a luxury mall. He's not trying to pass this off as your average working class shopping center, which would be incredibly disingenuous. But let's watch a bit of this video. I don't want to show all of it because it's ridiculous, but Yeah.
Okay, so I'm back in Chacao. I was here a few days ago. This is a wealthy area in Caracas where there was a huge opposition rally headlined by Juan Guaido to call on the Venezuelan government to allow in humanitarian aid. And people there told me that they lived in a communist dictatorship hellhole with a massive humanitarian crisis, so I'm back to see it for myself.
The socialists have done in Venezuela all of the same things that socialists, communists, totalitarians have done everywhere that they've had a chance to rule. The results have been catastrophic.
Hola, soy una turista de los Estados Unidos. Estoy buscando por socialismo. ¿No hay socialismo aquí? Un dictadura comunista. ¿No es aquí? ¿Te gusta Maduro o Guaido? Guaido. Okay, so here's an outdoor adventure store. Urban front. What is this? Floors. You can get really nice doors. This is a security door. I feel safe in here. Maduro's goons won't get me in here. Disculpe, ¿cuál puerta es más seguro contra los goons de Maduro? Pero el goon squad de Maduro puedes hacer miedo así. No te gusta Maduro?
Para nada.
Para nada. Y ustedes también. No. Nadie aquí.
Nadie.
Tortas.
I thought the previous video couldn't be more cringe, but congratulations, Max. You've achieved the impossible.
Parece muy sabroso. ¿Es sabroso? Sí. Y hay mucha gente que tienen hambre aquí. No.
And then you have really so many others rummaging through trash, something you and I would consider unconceivable, so common wherever we saw there. I mean, even ourselves on a limited budget, we found it often quite hard to get food, and that is so staggeringly the reason why people are so furious right now.
So, anyway, what do we...
Also note that his videos are in Caracas, the capital of the country, and presumably the city in the country that is most lavishly stocked with anything. You would assume that if you really wanted to see cases of hunger and scarcity, you would go outside Caracas. You would go to the more remote areas of Venezuela. You would, if you wanted to see, actual hunger or economic, or people struggling economically, go to the Venezuelan Amazon, go to the border regions with Colombia, where there's more scarcity, by the way, because a lot of people sell the regulated products. They cross the border into Colombia and then they sell them there at the market price. So there's actually more scarcity in the border with Venezuela. And again, this is not a conspiracy by economic elites. This is not US funded. This is not CIA operatives doing it. This is normal people doing it because they're desperate. Because this is a country that has expelled millions of people, millions of refugees, more refugees than any other country in recent memory, not in a war. So that is the result of desperation. I repeat, I'm not blaming the Venezuelan people for doing these kind of things. But the reality of the matter is he's lying to you. He's presenting a picture of conditions in the country that are not true.
We got some really good carrot cake here, marmalade. Hola. Soy un turista de los Estados Unidos. Estoy buscando por comunismo. Quiero un estilo comunista aquí. ¿No puedes hacer un estilo comunista de Maduro? Estoy buscando por comunismo en este lugar. No hay. Gracias. Okay, so in the US...
Oh God, this is, like, seriously, does he not realize that he is essential? For a guy who complains about American imperialism all the time, he is basically the quintessential ugly American tourist. Like the obnoxious, loud American abroad. He's doing basically tourist imperialism of his own. It's crazy, absolutely crazy.
They say like Maduro's ruined the economy with socialism, and I can't really find any here. I'm going to keep looking for it. That's what we constantly hear from the Republicans, but it seems like capitalism really is taking over, and there's massive speculation. Here's a chocolate place. Let's go check it out.
I'm gonna leave it there. But it's funny. This whole video is basically just to debunk a straw man that is already false. He's not arguing anything of substance regarding the Venezuelan economy. In reality, he's just debunking a Trump point by going to a wealthy enclave in Caracas and going to a luxury mall. So there's no videos that you will find of Max Blumenthal hanging out with regular Venezuelans at all, which is incredible for this kind of journalism. But that is how the wealthy live in Latin America. That is even how imagine just how wealthy Latin Americans are, and just how disassociated from the reality of so many of their countrymen are, that this still exists despite a crisis that has, destroyed Venezuela's GDP. The worst depression that any country in Latin America has suffered in history, and people still can live like this, which also reminds you of the egalitarian tendencies of Maduro to continue to allow all of this. Why isn't this wealth expropriated? Why aren't they paying more taxes? The stuff that they demand that Western governments do with their people. He simply doesn't seem to care about that when it comes to Venezuela, because he's not interested in the Venezuelan people. That is the point that I'm trying to make in this video. He does not care about the Venezuelan people. All he cares about is ideological posturing. That's all. That's all it is. That's all these anti-war shitheads do. Just posturing in favor of their tyrants, in favor, defending the worst regimes on earth, just because U.S. imperialism. That's really the answer. And they like to do that. That is my objection to this kind of journalism. Like I said, I am not opposed to ending U.S. imperialism in all its forms. I am simply opposed with the message, the way that this is transmitted by these people like the Grayzone and Jimmy Dore. But yeah, there's plenty of other videos of how Venezuelans live, the rich Venezuelans live. Here's another video that I'm going to show you.
Proceeded to find a shopping mall to investigate what we could find inside.
So we're taking an escalator up. There's 7 levels. It's 5 levels. And pretty nice in here. And it's very crowded. We were expecting there to be nobody, but that's certainly not the case. It's crowded in there.
There's a line. Something is going on there.
You can see Zara behind me. I feel like I'm in Europe or somewhere really fancy, and the line is super long.
This floor is like regular shopping mall food court, like McDonald's, Arturo, there is kind of KFC.
So it's quite interesting. We went to the top floor, which is the most luxurious, and it's pretty dead. I mean, there's very few people around here. One of the restaurants is full, but these designer shops are empty.
We are in a fancy camping store in here.
Literally, every brand that I've seen back home is sold here. It's extremely unique to find these really upscale products. So the fact that it is in Caracas makes it even more interesting.
There are lots of videos out there about supermarkets in Venezuela being empty, and I was really curious to see if it's actually true.
We're about to enter a supermarket in Caracas. They have every kind of cereal I've ever seen in my life. Literally more than Walmart. Cocoa Pebbles, Trix, Lucky Charms, Cookie Crisp. It's like my childhood. What an interesting experience. They had everything in there. Wow. Every product, every brand. That was really cool. Apparently there's...
So yeah, land of plenty if you have dollars. Something that clearly Max Blumenthal didn't really want to remind you. Now, for the evidence, because I am an economist and I like facts and numbers. Is there scarcity in Venezuela? Is there a humanitarian crisis? The answer is unequivocally yes. And you should not need to go to a luxury supermarket in Caracas to prove that this is not the case. There is a World Food Program, a recent deal with the government to supply food to 185,000 children. And this is quite recent. This is from this year. So a reminder that if you need assistance from the World Food Program, you are in not a good shape. Okay, the World Food Program only operates in countries under severe stress the really poorest countries in the world. The World Food Program does not operate in Argentina or Chile or Uruguay or Brazil or Mexico. It operates in countries that are even way poorer than your standard middle income Latin American country. And that's the data. 1 out of 3 Venezuelans is food insecure today and are in need of assistance. This includes 2.3 million people who are severely food insecure. Now, I'm sure that the Jimmy Dore fans and Grayzone fans are going to start saying that the UN is CIA, MI6 operatives. Here's a video from Nicolás Maduro's own YouTube channel showing his meetings with representatives of the World Food Agency.
De las Naciones Unidas, esto para brindarle la mayor atención. Venezuela, que hoy ha abierto sus brazos a esta comitiva, realmente tiene mucha moral para hablar de alimentación, sobre todo en estos tiempos.
Ingresan al Salón Sol del Perú del Palacio de Gobierno, donde se tiene previsto la firma de importantes alianzas y acuerdos de cooperación estratégicas entre el Gobierno de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, el Programa Mundial de Alimentación de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas, que fue fundado en 1961, programa que distribuye alimentos para apoyar proyectos de desarrollo, ofrece asistencia alimentaria y en algunos casos también la experiencia técnica y logística. La Organización de las
Yep, there you go. That is proof. PMA, Programa Mundial de Alimento, World Food Program. This is real stuff. Now, to their credit, I will say, being that this is happening during the COVID crisis, it might be influenced by the severity of the COVID crisis. And the reason I say this is because Venezuela's crisis had gotten better. I'm going to put it that way. By precisely around 2019. And here's a chart which shows basically the boom bust. There was indeed an economic boom under Chavez. It was largely fueled by the state of oil prices worldwide, which oil happens to be Venezuela's main export. So almost something like 80-90% of its exports are oil, have always been oil. And obviously that permits a huge amount of financing for the government, which then indeed they spent on social assistance programs, etc. And it worked. So the economy was growing there at some of the fastest rates of any country in the world. That is a fact. The critics of the Chavista regime have to accept this fact. And there was a massive drop in poverty and food insecurity. The country was doing well. So that wealth was trickling down. That is a good thing. Chavismo was not an entire failure. I think their main problem was that they failed to diversify their sources of export. I'm surprised that this was the case with essentially a leftist regime in Latin America, because leftist regimes in Latin America tend to really idealize the period of like state-led development in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so the hallmark of economic development during that period was import substitution. Most countries in Latin America had very important import substitution programs, and it helped them industrialize, and it helped them reduce their reliance on goods abroad. But Chavez never did any of this, which is really, really surprising. And even now, if you look at the composition of Venezuelan trade, they still, 83% of their exports in 2019 is petroleum, crude oil, basically. That is still a massive number. And let me just change the size of this window so you can see it better. This idea that Venezuela is under a blockade is not true at all. You can see the US is still the country's third largest export partner. It used to be the first just a few years before, but India and China have now taken over as the main buyers of Venezuelan oil. And in terms of imports, the US is still the second largest source of imports for Venezuela. So where's the blockade, guys? And back with this other chart, the part that you can see, because my face was there, was this. And this is important, because as you can see here, the worst parts of the crisis were basically at the very beginning, around 2013-14, and in the middle part of the decade, so 2015-16ish. So that BBC video that I showed was when things were at their worst. Whereas from around 2018-19ish, things got better. The economy is still contracting. They're still in a depression. But it's tanking less than it used to be. And that is a good thing. That is a good thing, because it allows you to manage the economy in ways that aren't necessarily the crisis mode that you had here. And this has allowed the government to undertake a number of economic reforms, many of which have been done kind of stealthily. They don't really want to announce that previous policies were a failure. So they don't really announce this. And one of the key changes that they've done is that they've allowed dollar transactions more and more and more. So they've sort of loosened the grip on dollar transactions, which they used to have. And this has, I've seen various studies, some of the numbers show that around half of transactions in Caracas, or maybe it was the entire country, I don't remember the number, if it was the whole country or just the capital, but about half of all transactions are now in dollars. And in some other cities like Maracaibo, which is actually the center of Venezuela's oil industry, it's even higher. It's over 80% of transactions are now in dollars. So this has essentially insulated the people who can undertake those transactions in dollars. It insulates them from inflation, which is the main source of reduction of purchasing power. So that is a good thing, and that has allowed, like I said, the economy to still be in recession or depression, however you want to call it. Now it looks more like a recession than a depression, but there is a degree of stability that there wasn't before, and that is very important to realize why things were much better in the video that Max Blumenthal showed than in the BBC video, which was a couple of years before that. Now, as for Scarcity itself, well, it just so happens that the government used to publish data on scarcity. They had an index of scarcity, índice de escasez, and they published this all throughout the noughties, as far as I recall. And then they stopped publishing it in 2014 because the number was starting to get embarrassing. And like I said, even though the economy was booming back in the Chavez period, it was still mismanaged, like in terms of the distortions that there were in the economy, which are the causes of scarcity. And the number was, as you can see in this chart here, the scarcity rate was around 10%-ish, a bit higher. And that's the number that you see if you see quotes of that number from before, in the previous decade, in the noughties. And then it started to go up. This was, the lead up to the bust, and it started getting into the 20s by the time they stopped calculating it. Although there's private economists who have continued to track it, and I tried to find the last mention of this from an official document, and this is from the Central Bank of Venezuela, so that you know that I am not making this up. This is not a CIA, MI6, State Department narrative website. This is the Venezuelan Central Bank. And they do mention there we go, at the very end. The scarcity indicator rose from 22.1.2 to 22.4. So that is from November of 2013. I could not find a more recent figure. And like I said, they got rid of it altogether. They used to present this with their inflation figures. Now, I found another document. In 2016, again, this is their inflation report. which I didn't find in the central bank website. I found it on the website of Telesur, which is, you know, the propaganda channel of the Venezuelan state and some other leftist Latin American countries. This is basically the Russia Today of Latin America. And they also mention a similar indicator, and it's here. So let me translate this. It says the lack of availability of many products is perceived by the population as one of the main problems that the country faces. So they're admitting right there that there is scarcity, along with speculation and hoarding. So this last sentence is tricky. I'm going to do my best, because there's a word here that I find a bit troubling. It says here, at least from my reading of it, the perception of the existence of hoarding in the country is 87%. So a lot of the media at the time reported on this as essentially being a euphemism for scarcity, because they don't want to admit that scarcity is caused by bad economic management. They want to blame the speculators and the hoarders for it. So they changed the phrasing to imply that this was just hoarding. My problem is with this word, because apreciación also means appreciation. So it could mean perception, but it could also mean appreciation, which would be a very regular, you would find this word often in a report on inflation. You know, it's an economic concept. So I'm not really sure what this measures. It could be the same index, that they just changed the name. It could be a different form of measuring scarcity, which is entirely possible. And if you notice, the number is much higher than the previous one from 2013, although it's not inconceivable, given that this was at the height of the crisis, that it was much worse. So I really don't know what this is. It could be that 87% of products in Venezuela suffered from some sort of supply problem, thus scarcity. It could be that apreciación refers to this being a public perception. So maybe this is a survey of people who report how they perceive scarcity. I don't know. They don't offer any explanation. If anyone actually knows, please comment below. I would very much, I would appreciate it. But yeah, but there you go. So that is the very government of Venezuela admitting that there is scarcity. So how does Max Blumenthal get away with denying that there is a humanitarian crisis when we have, you know, the numbers of refugees, we have the evidence of there being food programs? How does he get away with that? And how does he get away with denying that scarcity exists by going to a lavishly stocked upscale supermarket when the very Venezuelan government says that there is scarcity and that they had even an index of scarcity that was published on a regular basis? So he's full of shit. Let's just, you know, be clear. He's full of shit. Finally, because this video is getting quite long, I just want to show some other videos. When I first encountered Blumenthal's video, I went on a bit of a YouTube rabbit hole of trying to find other videos of supermarkets in Venezuela, and I found this one. He seems to be a Venezuelan like travel blogger, and what I found interesting about this video is that it was shot in February 27th of the same year. So this was shot just 6 days after, or published, I mean, I don't know, but it was clearly shot around the same time that Blumenthal's original video here at Excelsior Gamma. So let's watch this video. This guy, again, I'm going to bring up the racial aspect of Venezuelan socioeconomics. He's white, so he's a travel blogger, so he's probably relatively well off. He is probably not a big fan of the regime in any way, but I did find these videos to be much more honest than what Blumenthal mentioned. And he doesn't go into politics. He's just going into the supermarkets and trying to see if they really are empty, if there are scarcity. Because the title of this video is like the end of scarcity. So At the beginning, he mentions that he was out of the country for 2 years. So he left Venezuela clearly when things were much worse. And now he's back when things are supposedly better. So let's see what he has to say about it.
Pero bueno, no perdamos más tiempo y vamos al primer supermercado. Miren, esta leche debe ser muy buena porque es lo único que se repite en todo lo largo de este anaquel, es leche descremada. Tiene un precio de 5.090 bolívares soberanos, un litro de leche. Lo mismo pasa de este otro lado y lo completan con agua. Esta botellita de agua vale 930 bolívares soberanos, o sea, casi 1.000 bolívares soberanos. Estas simplemente están apagadas. Aquí se repite la misma leche en todo esto. En aquellos que están atrás también está todo cerrado, no hay ni siquiera productos. Esta es la parte de charcutería. Fíjense que no hay nada de productos aquí y lo que adornan es con conflay y con leche. Aquí también lo que hay es leche. Aquí sí podemos ver algo de quesos, salchichas, quesos. Aquí hay un poco de embutidos, quesos, jamones. Miren, esa bandejita de queso que tendrá máximo 5 o 6 lonjas de queso está en 7.437 bolívares soberanos. Una mantequilla, 6.126. Aquí solo hay mantequilla y leche. Lo que más se repite, mantequilla y leche. Miren, un kilo de tomates está en 1.000.
Have you noticed the common theme of there being like entire shelves of the same product? You'll see more of this, and I'm going to explain why.
200 bolívares soberanos. El kilo de cebolla está en 3.300 bolívares soberanos. Este pasillo que estamos recorriendo ahora solo tiene sal, ¿ok? Solo sal, todo esto es sal de la misma marca. De este lado solo tenemos vinagre, todo esto es vinagre de la misma marca.
So, why is this important? Because, as I said earlier in the video, scarcity is not that there's nothing there. So this idea of a supermarket with entirely empty shelves, that is not the common experience of scarcity. Maybe it's what, the international media picked up. I'm quite sure that CNN, if they were reporting from Venezuela, probably wanted to show one supermarket, probably not in Caracas, that had practically nothing. That is not how scarcity is reflected in everyday life. The way scarcity is reflected in everyday life is, as was shown in the other videos, of the inability of people to find basic goods at any given time, because that supermarket at that moment will not have it. On the other hand, all those videos, like this one, show an overabundance of non-essential goods. All this vinegar. I mean, vinegar is not an essential product at all, or mayo. So that is how you have scarcity in an economy that is not a market economy. It's a very heavily regulated market economy, and it's also not central planning. So it's a weird mishmash of these things, which is probably why it functions this way. That's why that's the consequence of all these distortions to the exchange rate, to the market prices, etc. So, this is a more honest reflection of how scarcity works.
Mayonesa Mavesa, ok, todo de la misma marca, y mantequilla también de la misma marca. Miren, en este pasillo solo hay galletas María. Todo este anaquel está lleno de papel higiénico. Sí hay, es de una marca que ni siquiera tiene marca y está en 5.345 bolívares, 2 rollos. 5 kilos de jabón para lavar están en 63.076 bolívares soberanos y la gente gana 18.000, imagínense. Si tienes un bebé pequeño y ganas salario mínimo, ni siquiera te alcanza para un paquete de 35 pañales. Está en 26.680 bolívares. Estas neveras simplemente están vacías, no tienen nada. Esta también está toda vacía. Esas que ven en el fondo, también todas esas neveras están vacías, no tienen nada. Sí, aquí 500 gramos de café están en 6.400 bolívares soberanos. Miren, lo más barato que pueden comprar es un pollo entero y sale en 4.690 bolívares. Compré esto regulado, es harina de trigo y aceite. Estos son productos que entregan.
So he said he bought the flour and the oil that he just showed, that those were regulated. So those were the regulated prices. And these people, he's going to explain, are the ones who are authorized to give them away because there is a limit to how many people can buy regulated products.
Esas personas allí porque están regulados.
That wouldn't happen if there wasn't scarcity.
Solo entregan 2 por persona. No sé si logran ver, pero la mayoría de las personas tienen aceite y harina, que es lo que está regulado ahorita. Miren, sin planificarlo, conseguí productos regulados. Esto fue lo que compré. Es un aceite de litro de la marca Batel, que es una marca, bueno, un tanto conocida aquí en Venezuela. Y también conseguí harina de maíz, que es para hacer arepa, la famosa arepa venezolana. Estos productos, como pueden ver acá, tienen su precio marcado y no pueden ser vendidos más de este precio. Serían 2.600 bolívares soberanos. Y aquí está el precio que tuviese el producto sin quitar los 5 ceros que le quitaron a la moneda. Fíjense la cantidad de ceros que tiene. Al igual pasa con esta harina, tiene su precio regulado en 3.180 bolívares. Y en total, por los 4 productos, yo pagué una suma total de 11.500.
So he's saying he showed the regulated prices that are printed on the items, so they can't sell them above that, unless it's the black market, obviously. And even then, just those products were 11,560 bolívares at a time when the minimum wage was 18,000 plus your 1,800 stipend.
60 bolívares. Pero fíjense lo sorprendente del asunto, que inclusive regulado el producto, tuvo un valor de 11.560 bolívares y un salario mínimo mensual son 18.000 bolívares más el bono de alimentación, que son 1.800. En teoría, el bono de alimentación debería alcanzarte para hacer mínimamente un mercado, así sea de 15 días, no vamos a decir que de un mes, pero es que no te alcanza ni para comprar este aceite de 1 litro que vale 2.600 bolívares. Otra cosa que si se pudieron fijar es que no tengo bolsa plástica donde metí los productos, porque el supermercado ni tiene para venderte ni tiene para darte. Anteriormente te la regalaban. Bueno, sigamos al siguiente supermercado.
So he said that there were no plastic bags because they're not offering anything. So one of the positive sides of Scarcity in Venezuela is that it's very environmentally friendly. Well, at least he's showing like where the supermarkets are, unlike Blumenthal, who clearly went to the nicer parts. This looks like a more middle class part of town.
Este es el supermercado al que vamos. Vamos a entrar y no perdamos tiempo. Miren, comencemos. 1 kilo de azúcar, 3.995. Miren cómo ahora resguardan una simple lata de pirulín para que no se la roben. Aparte me dejó loco y es que pusieron
¿Usas protector bucal? Prueba Corega Tabs. Es práctico y funciona.
mostradores aquí para separar esa mitad del supermercado que está completamente vacío. O sea, este supermercado era el doble y pusieron esto aquí para tapar esa parte que está allá atrás, que está todo vacío. Miren, miren allá. Esto solo tienes...
So he's saying that half the supermarket was essentially cordoned off. So it looks full because half the supermarket is empty.
Ketchup, salsa de tomate y de soya y solo en la...
Again, this is repeating how Scarcity reflects itself. A non-essential item, tons and tons of them, oversupply of them. Done deliberately, I guess, to make it look fuller than it is, because let's be honest, how many people do you think buy soy sauce? That's insane. I mean, if you go to any normal supermarket on any given day, you're going to see a couple of these, but you're not going to see an entire shelf full of soy sauce. So that's also the kind of false impression of plenty that is given by the stores. Obviously, you know, this is normal. If I had a store, that's exactly what I do. You don't want to make your store look like it's empty. But that is, again, if you're just looking at the pictures, it'll not tell you the reality. This is not a sign of a healthy economy. That's my point. No matter how impressive it looks to see all these soy sauce bottles next to each other, that is not a healthy sign in any way of supply and demand matching.
Parte del frente, porque atrás no hay nada. Igual por este otro lado, solo ketchup. Este pasillo entero es de solo papel higiénico, de la misma marca, y está en 11.653. Por si no habían visto la presentación nueva de los cereales, es en blanco y negro. Y una cajita de 350 gramos vale 4.372 bolívares soberanos. Lo crean o no, esta simple caja de cereal resume lo que está Venezuela ahora. Esta parte del supermercado también está clausurada, como ven, tienen unas paletas allá, ahí, y está que no se puede pasar. Miren, esta es la parte que les decía. Voy a disimular haciendo esto. Pero aquella parte de allá no hay paso. Aquí en esta parte simplemente hay pura sopa Maggi. ¿Ok? Sopa Maggi. Aquí no hay nada en lo absoluto. Aquí hay unas salsas de tomate. Miren, esa bandejita de jamón tiene máximo 3, 4, 5, 6 lonjitas de jamón. 3.141 bolívares. Son 124 gramos de jamón. Hasta los momentos de mi recorrido no he conseguido ni harina pan, ese tipo de cosas. Para los que todavía se pueden dar un lujo de tener un perro en casa, un saco de 2 kilos vale 42.500 bolívares soberanos. 250 gramos de pasta valen 2.730 bolívares. Una docena de huevos, 5.060 bolívares. Fíjense la diferencia. Este aceite, que es de la competencia, no está regulado y vale 12.500 bolívares.
So he mentioned that is a non-regulated brand of cooking oil, and it costs 12,000, over 12,000, versus the regulated brand, which what was it, like 2,600 or 2,900?
500 gramos de pan Bimbo, 4.700.
So that's why it's so important to try and get the regulated goods, because there's no scarcity in terms of the market priced goods. And even the regulated goods you can get in the black market for more expensive. But that's what people you saw being on those hour-long lines to get the regulated products. That's really what scarcity is in terms of the basic goods that you need to get.
10 bolívares. Bueno, ya salí de ese supermercado porque la verdad es que no hay mucho que ver. Vámonos al siguiente. Que no conseguí productos regulados como me pasó en el anterior supermercado. No vayan a creer que eso es siempre, que siempre hay productos regulados disponibles. Simplemente tuve suerte de estar en el lugar y en el momento indicado. Bueno, vamos al siguiente.
So that is what I mentioned earlier, that he didn't find any of the regulated products in this supermarket. So it's basically luck whether you will find the regulated products, the essential ones that you're looking for. Again, back in looking at that BBC video that I showed at the beginning, that is the struggle. That is really what it's not that you're going store after store because they're all empty. It's just they don't have that one item that you need, and you end up wasting a massive amount of time finding the one store that actually has flour, which, like I said, in Venezuela is kind of a staple item, or cooking oil, which is also essential. Things like that. That is the issue of scarcity. And this guy made another video. He made a video later that year, and he's decidedly more upbeat at the time. So again, this is reinforcing this idea that I mentioned, that the Venezuelan economy was getting better. And in many ways, that has also had political consequences, because as things got better, support for Guaido and the opposition has also weakened. And you can notice this. Like, they're practically a non-entity nowadays. Earlier this year, the EU stopped recognizing Guaido, as the quote legitimate president. So Maduro has cemented his grip on power, which is a bad thing, because certainly Venezuela is not a communist dictatorship, but that's because it's not communist. But it is a dictatorship. There are no free and fair elections. He incarcerates his opponent. He commits human rights violations. He is not a good guy in any way. And in the long run, it's not a good thing for him to be in power. But that is not to say that the opposition is any good, or in any way legitimate. You know, this idea of Guaido being the legitimate president is also a bit ridiculous. But you can see why this has helped the regime, and why the opposition is now struggling, because now the economic case that they have, because Venezuelans, I think at this point, are just so tired of what has gone on with their economy over the past decade, that they're happy to see some state of normality. And perhaps in a few more years of normality, then they'll start fighting again, start demonstrating much more opposition to the government than they are now. But anyway, let's watch just a tiny bit of it. I know this video is long. It's now run over an hour. I just want to show you one tiny bit of this video.
Bueno, lo que les puedo comentar hasta el momento es que me tiene sorprendido bastante el supermercado, porque, bueno, veo variedad de productos, veo que los precios sí están elevados, casi comparados como están en el exterior, o un poquito más caros dependiendo del producto, pero bueno, ya como que los supermercados se están comenzando a abastecer. He visto como que, bueno, ya esto que se está adaptando la economía a una dolarización ha ayudado a que las empresas puedan traer más productos, así sean importados, más caros, pero ya no hay aquel desabastecimiento que había antes, donde la gente tenía que hacer colas para comprar los productos, donde había mucha reventa de productos porque la gente compraba los productos regulados y después los revendía, y entonces igualmente las personas tenían que estar pagándolo a sobreprecio.
So he just explained literally everything that I just explained earlier. And by the way, he's in the same Excelsior Plus store that Blumenthal was. And again, look at the people who buy there. They are white. Very different racial makeup from the people that you see in the videos in the Excelsior Plus, with the ones that you saw in the lines in the BBC video and some of the other ones. So, but he's basically explaining that dollarization has enabled a lot of stores to import many goods, and that has allowed people to buy them there and rely less on the black market. And that is probably why you, I guess, don't have the kind of lines that you had even in this supermarket, because as we saw in the BBC video, there was a massive queue in the what's called the parking lot So, by the way, I say line and queue. My American English and my British English get completely mishmashed here. Apologies. But yeah.
Bueno, antes no se conseguía por ningún lado café y ya por lo menos, miren, hay algunos cafés por acá. Marcas que no conocía, la verdad, pero sí hay. Miren, aquí hay aceite, que esto también...
So if you just saw that, I'm gonna end it here. But you notice that there was more variety. In a normal store, you have not an entire shelf full of the same product, of the same brand. So that definitely is an indicator that things are in a better shape now than they were back then. So I hope this video helped debunk many of the stupidities that you saw in the Max Blumenthal video, which is not an accurate representation of the reality in Venezuela. And I hope this video, one of its takeaways is to explain a bit how the Venezuelan economy actually works, which Max Blumenthal did not bother describing, and for people to understand how scarcity reflects itself in reality. Like I said, scarcity is not the fact that you will not find anything in a store. It is that you will not find what you're looking for at any given moment. And that is not to say that it's not available everywhere, simply that you will not necessarily find it the moment that you are inside the store. That is really how scarcity works. And in the event, it's almost the same thing in terms of like the time that you spend trying to find a supermarket that actually has what you need. And perhaps the frustration of looking at shelves full of stuff you don't need, because that is the mismatch between supply and demand. You will have a lack of supply on basic goods and an oversupply of goods that aren't essential, like soy sauce. Clearly not a staple item in Venezuela. So that's the first takeaway. The second takeaway is the point I made at the beginning of the video, and that is we need, as leftists and as socialists, we need to really fight against this very binary narrative that people like Max Blumenthal and the Grayzone and Jimmy Dore like to present. This very black and white view of the world, where the only villains are the US and its allies and all the instruments of US imperialism, and everyone else must necessarily be good and therefore never criticized. And therefore we should never feel solidarity for any of the victims of these regimes, because they are serving a higher good, which is fighting US imperialism, or they are simply CIA crisis actors, as they probably want you to think that they are. And I'm sure the people who have been brainwashed by this kind of bullshit, I genuinely believe. I mean, I've encountered people on the internet who they're basically like their mental ability to have nuance in these kinds of issues is gone, like permanently impaired. So it might sound odd that I'm essentially making an hour-long video against something that the left has always held dear, because the anti-war movement is one of the most symbolic manifestations of the left over the past 100 years, and it should remain that way. We should be the side that fights against injustice in the international stage. We should call out the ridiculous liberal world order that is basically just a cover for a small number of very powerful countries and very wealthy countries to do what they want with hardly any restrictions. But we should do this without having to defend dictators, without having to defend tyrants, by whitewashing crimes against humanity, like chemical attacks in Syria, which a lot of these dipshits in the Grayzone insist aren't real. Claim that the camps where so many Uyghurs in China are being detained are merely retraining camps, as I've heard some tankies argue on YouTube. we should not resort to that, because it makes us look so bad, and it just generates a pathological impulse for this performative way of promoting our ideology, which is not how it should be. So, with that in mind, I urge people who watch my show to have that nuance, to think in shades of gray, to realize, for example, that Cubans protesting against their government right now have legitimate grievances, because Cuba is an authoritarian state. These people do not have civil rights and freedoms the way that you and I have, while at the same time saying that US sanctions on Cuba are inhumane and cruel and need to end, and that this has been one of the most despicable acts of foreign policy aggression by a great power against another, a smaller country, in recent memory. We can say both things. We can argue both things. Just do not be caught in this web of anti-war derangement, which is the kindest way that I will describe it, because you can spiral out of control, and I've seen it, and I've seen it have effects on politics. I've seen how, for example, a large segment of the British left did in fact embrace anti-Semitism, and it only helped a media narrative make it far more worse than it was. But that was only possible because it was real. And thanks to that, we still have the fucking Tories in power, because one of the big reasons why Jeremy Corbyn did not win was because of the anti-Semitism scandal. So it has effects. And the people who have been on record making anti-Semitic statements in Britain are people who started this way, who started with, just anti-war ideas that then progressed and progressed and progressed. It's people who had, the good intention of showing solidarity with the Palestinian people, which I think we all should, which then progressed into a hatred of Israel. And it didn't stop there and ended up progressing into a hatred of all Jews. So we need to know when to stop. And I think with sites like the Grayzone, they don't want you to stop. They want you to go all out. That's the totalizing ideology that you see in people like Jimmy Dore. That's why they love the Grayzone. Because Jimmy Dore does not accept anything other than the extreme belief. Anything else is a traitor to the cause. And that's why he smears everyone that isn't as extreme as he is, as essentially, CIA, State Department shills, when he's the one that's actually shilling for tyrants. So don't fall for this, please. And I hope this video of Max Blumenthal debunking his argument with facts is proof that sites like the Grayzone are basically just in this business of poisoning people's minds and radicalizing them in a way that ultimately is detrimental to the very things that they want to fight. So please open your eyes. Please have nuance. It is often not easy to reconcile beliefs that are apparently so contradictory. But you have to do it. You have to do it. You have to give the arguments against US and Western imperialism without shilling for tyrants. Please, please, please. If you really care about the people in those countries who are the victims of violence, of human rights abuses, of the lack of democracy, if you care about those people, do not shill for tyrants the way Blumenthal just did. So, thanks for watching this video. please like, please share, please subscribe. I'll definitely be doing more debunking of Jimmy Dore and the Grayzone. But yeah, I hope this definitively showed how they are misleading their viewers into presenting visions of a country that most people will never visit. That's a fact. Most of you will not go to Venezuela. And Max Blumenthal makes you want to show a Venezuela that is only real for a select few people. So again, thanks for watching.